For exactly 36 hours, no one knew where Claudia Sheinbaum was. The presidential guards were all on high alert. American media was spreading rumors that she had been kidnapped. Then suddenly, she appeared at the presidential palace gates in an ordinary taxi. There were dust stains on her clothes, her eyes were red from exhaustion. In her hand, she held an iPad containing only 5 videos. These videos would forever change the fate of Mexico's economy that night. The morning had begun routinely in Mexico City. The sprawling metropolis was awakening to its usual symphony of street vendors calling out their wares, cars honking in gridlocked traffic, and the sizzle of breakfast tacos being prepared on countless corner stands. Inside Los Pinos, the presidential residence, Dr. Claudia Sheinbaum had already been working for 3 hours, poring over economic reports that troubled her deeply. General Ramirez, her chief of security, entered with the morning briefing. Madam President, the situation in the southern states continues to deteriorate. The drought has destroyed nearly 70% of the corn crops. Farmers are desperate. Sheinbaum nodded grimly. Since taking office, she had faced mounting ecological and economic challenges. As a scientist before entering politics, she understood the data all too well. Climate change was hitting Mexico harder and faster than predicted. But something about the pattern of economic impact seemed suspicious. Too targeted, too convenient for certain corporate interests. And the water privatization contracts that were signed before my administration? She asked. That's actually what I wanted to discuss, General Ramirez replied, lowering his voice despite being alone with the president. Our investigation found something disturbing. The geological surveys used to justify the emergency privatization appear to have been manipulated. The actual water scarcity doesn't match the reported data. Sheinbaum's expression hardened. This confirmed suspicions she'd harbored for months, that someone had deliberately exaggerated the water crisis in specific regions to justify selling water rights to private corporations at bargain prices. Who else knows about this? She asked. Just my most trusted team. We've kept it off official channels as you instructed. Sheinbaum stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city she had once served as mayor before becoming Mexico's first female president. A decision was crystallizing in her mind, one that would be risky, but potentially the only way to gather irrefutable evidence. Cancel my appointments for today and tomorrow, she said quietly. General Ramirez looked alarmed. Madam President, you have the meeting with the American trade delegation this afternoon and the Water Consortium executives tomorrow. Especially those, Sheinbaum interrupted. Tell them I've come down with a severe migraine. My doctor has ordered complete rest for 24 hours. What should I tell the cabinet? Tell them I'm working on a classified environmental assessment and will brief them when it's complete. The general hesitated. Madam President, with all due respect, protocol requires that I know your whereabouts at all times. If you're planning something… Sheinbaum turned to face her security chief, her expression resolute. Miguel, for what I must do, even you cannot know. The fewer people who know, the safer everyone will be. I need you to trust me. General Ramirez straightened, recognizing the determination in her eyes. I understand, Madam President. When will you return? Tomorrow evening, if all goes well, Sheinbaum replied, already moving to a closet where she kept casual clothes for rare moments of normalcy. If I don't return in 48 hours, there's an encrypted file on my private server. Password, Frida 1907. Access it only if I disappear. As General Ramirez left, Sheinbaum quickly changed into civilian clothes, jeans, a simple blouse, and a wide-brimmed hat that concealed her distinctive features. She took only a few essential items, a small tracking device hidden in her watch, an iPad with special encryption, and a phone that couldn't be traced to her. Using a service tunnel that dated back to the building's construction, Sheinbaum slipped out of the presidential compound unnoticed. She walked several blocks through busy streets where she was just another face in the crowd before hailing a rideshare vehicle that took her to a residential neighborhood on the city's outskirts. There, in an unassuming apartment, waited the one person she trusted completely with this mission. Dr. Elena Vasquez, her former research colleague from her days as a climate scientist at UNAM, the National Autonomous University of Mexico. I was beginning to worry, Elena said, rising from where she had been working at a laptop surrounded by stacks of scientific journals. Some things can only be verified by the president herself, Sheinbaum replied. Is everything ready? Elena nodded toward a table covered with equipment. Satellite phones, water testing kits, geolocation devices, all untraceable. But Claudia, this is extremely dangerous. If you're right about who's manipulating the water data, you're putting yourself directly in their crosshairs. Then we better make sure they don't see us coming, Sheinbaum said with quiet determination. Within an hour, they were driving south in an unmarked van, heading toward the state of Guerrero, where some of the most lucrative water privatization contracts had been granted. What exactly was Sheinbaum looking for? Who did she suspect? And why would the president of Mexico put herself at such risk instead of sending environmental investigators? The answer lay in a pattern she had detected over the past year, a pattern no one else had seen because no one else had the combination of scientific expertise and access to classified information. Environmental impact reports, meteorological data, water table measurements, and economic forecasts had shown her something disturbing. The regions declared to be in critical water emergency often didn't match actual rainfall and aquifer data. But the final piece had come just 1 week ago. A confidential report showing that in certain drought-stricken areas, industrial water usage had actually increased by 300% immediately after privatization, while local communities saw their supply restricted. 6 hours later, Sheinbaum and Elena abandoned their van near a small village and continued on foot, approaching a series of ridges that overlooked a valley where a major water bottling facility had been built with remarkable speed after water rights had been privatized. The satellite imagery showed something strange about this facility, Elena explained as they hiked up a steep path. The water is supposedly being extracted from the valley aquifer that geological surveys claimed was nearly depleted. Yet they're pumping out millions of liters per day, Sheinbaum added. They reached a vantage point as the sun began to set and used high-powered binoculars to observe the facility below. What they saw confirmed Sheinbaum's suspicions. The plant was operating at full capacity, with truck after truck being loaded with bottled water. Water that local farmers were being told was too scarce for irrigation. We need to get closer, Sheinbaum said. I need to test the water source and document exactly what's happening. As darkness fell, they carefully made their way down to the facility's perimeter. The risk was enormous. If discovered, Sheinbaum would face not just political embarrassment, but potentially physical danger. The water rights had been granted to Aqua Global, a subsidiary of the massive North Star Corporation, which had deep connections in both Mexican and American politics. Using specialized equipment, they cut through the fence at a blind spot between security cameras. Inside the perimeter, they moved silently toward the main pumping station, where Sheinbaum collected water samples and Elena took readings of the extraction rate. This is impossible, Elena whispered, checking her instruments. According to the official geological survey, this aquifer should be yielding less than 10% of what they're extracting. The survey was falsified, Sheinbaum said grimly, carefully storing water samples in specialized containers. And I'm betting the quality analysis was too. They made their way to the facility's main office building, using an employee ID card they had acquired through Elena's contacts to gain access. Inside, Sheinbaum headed straight for the records room while Elena stood watch. For the next hour, Sheinbaum photographed documents and downloaded data onto her iPad. Extraction volumes, chemical analysis reports, and most damning of all, internal emails discussing the favorable geological survey results before they had even been conducted. We have what we need here, she said finally, but it's just one facility. We need to check at least 2 more to establish the pattern. Their mission continued through the night and into the next day. At each location, they found the same discrepancies: abundant water being extracted from supposedly depleted sources, falsified environmental impact statements, and evidence of collusion between government officials and corporation executives. By the second evening, they had gathered compelling evidence from 3 different facilities in 2 states. They were preparing to return to Mexico City when Elena's satellite phone buzzed with an alert from their information network. Claudia, she said, her voice tense. "There's been a security breach. Someone at the presidential office leaked your absence. North Star executives have called an emergency meeting with their security team." "We need to move faster," Sheinbaum replied. "They'll be looking for us now." They abandoned their original return route, instead taking back roads and traveling through small villages where Sheinbaum would be less likely to be recognized. They stopped only once, at a remote farmhouse where Elena had arranged for a secure satellite connection. Sheinbaum used this connection to upload the evidence they had gathered to a secure server insurance in case they were intercepted before reaching Mexico City. She also recorded a brief video explanation of what they had discovered, her face illuminated only by the glow of the iPad in the darkened farmhouse. "The water crisis facing our southern states is real," she said into the camera, "but it has been deliberately exacerbated and manipulated. The data I've collected proves that Aqua Global and its parent company North Star have extracted water at unsustainable rates while falsely claiming scarcity to drive up prices for local communities." As they continued their journey, they heard radio reports that grew increasingly alarming. The president's extended absence had been noticed. Opposition politicians were demanding information. American news networks were speculating about kidnapping or worse. The situation grew even more dangerous when they were nearly recognized at a checkpoint. A police officer looked twice at Sheinbaum before Elena created a distraction that allowed them to pass. It was clear that their description had been circulated. By the morning of the second day, they were still several hours from Mexico City when they spotted suspicious vehicles following them. Elena made a split-second decision, turning off the main road onto a dirt track that led into dense forest. "We need to separate," she told Sheinbaum. "They're looking for two women traveling together." "That's too dangerous for you," Sheinbaum protested. "I'm not the president," Elena replied firmly. "Mexico needs you more than it needs me. Take the evidence and go. I'll lead them away." With a heavy heart, Sheinbaum took the iPad containing all their documentation and continued on foot through the forest while Elena drove away in the opposite direction. For hours, Sheinbaum hiked through difficult terrain, using her knowledge of geography and climate patterns to find her way. Eventually, she reached a small village where, after ensuring it was safe, she approached an elderly woman sitting outside her modest home. "I need to get to Mexico City urgently," Sheinbaum said, deciding to take a calculated risk. "I'm President Sheinbaum." The woman studied her face, taking in the dust-covered clothes and exhausted expression. Instead of showing surprise, she simply nodded and called to her grandson, who owned the village's only taxi. "Take her wherever she needs to go," the woman instructed the young man, "and tell no one." The final leg of the journey was tense but uneventful. As the taxi approached the gates of Los Pinos, 36 hours after Sheinbaum had disappeared, the guards initially raised their weapons at the unscheduled vehicle. Then shock spread across their faces as they recognized their president in the back seat. General Ramirez rushed forward. "Madam President, thank God you're safe. We've been searching everywhere. There are rumors that—" "There's no time," Sheinbaum cut him off, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Assemble the cabinet and the Attorney General immediately, and find Dr. Elena Vasquez. She may be in danger." Inside the presidential residence, Sheinbaum refused to rest until she had secured the evidence and initiated a rescue operation for Elena. Only then did she allow a doctor to examine her while she briefed her closest advisors on what she had discovered. "The drought affecting our farmers is being weaponized," she explained, connecting her iPad to a large screen where videos and documents appeared. "Aqua Global is extracting water at rates that are depleting aquifers, while simultaneously restricting access to local communities and charging exorbitant prices for what should be a public resource." The evidence was undeniable. Falsified geological surveys, internal corporate emails discussing how to leverage the crisis, and most damning of all, video footage of massive extraction operations in supposedly critically depleted areas. "What do you want us to do, Madam President?" the Attorney General asked, stunned by the evidence before them. Sheinbaum stood, drawing strength from the urgency of the situation despite her physical exhaustion. "Prepare for the most significant economic reform since the oil nationalization of 1938. That evening, as search teams located and rescued Elena from pursuers in the forests of Guerrero, Sheinbaum addressed the nation in an emergency broadcast. Still bearing the dust and fatigue of her journey, she stood resolute before the Mexican flag. "My fellow citizens," she began, "for too long, the most basic resource for life, water, has been manipulated for profit at the expense of our people. Today, that manipulation ends." She presented the evidence methodically: the falsified surveys, the extraction data, the price gouging, the collusion between corporate interests and corrupt officials. There could be no denying the scale of the deception. "Effective immediately," she declared, "I am invoking emergency powers under Article 29 of our Constitution to suspend all private water rights granted in the last 5 years, pending full investigation. Water access will be restored to all communities, and a new National Water Security Agency will assume temporary control of all major extraction and distribution operations." Then came the announcement that would reshape Mexico's economic landscape. "Furthermore, I am sending legislation to Congress that will recognize water as a fundamental public good that cannot be fully privatized. Companies may participate in distribution under strict regulation, but the resource itself belongs to the Mexican people as guaranteed by our Constitution." The international reaction was immediate and hostile. North Star's stock plummeted on global markets. The American Secretary of Commerce issued a statement expressing grave concern over the expropriation of private assets. Financial analysts predicted capital flight from Mexico, but within Mexico, something unexpected occurred. People took to the streets in support of their president. Farmers in drought-affected regions organized convoys to the capital in solidarity. Indigenous communities held ceremonies of gratitude. Social media exploded with the hashtag #Agua para Todos, water for all, as citizens shared stories of price gouging and restricted access. 3 days after her return, as corporate lawyers prepared international legal challenges and financial pressures mounted, Sheinbaum received news that brought her to tears. The first water quality tests from the samples she had collected showed dangerous levels of industrial chemicals, compounds that wouldn't have been detected by standard testing, but that Elena had specifically looked for based on her research. "They weren't just taking our water," Sheinbaum told her cabinet. "They were poisoning what they left behind." This revelation transformed the narrative completely. What had been portrayed internationally as an economic dispute suddenly became a public health emergency. Even critical foreign media couldn't ignore the implications of a major corporation extracting clean water while leaving contaminated sources for local consumption. In the weeks that followed, Mexico underwent a transformation. The National Water Security Agency implemented unprecedented transparency measures. Community water monitoring programs were established. Investment flowed into innovative water conservation technologies and infrastructure. International corporations, after initial resistance, eventually returned to negotiations, this time facing a government with irrefutable evidence of malfeasance and the full support of its citizens. The new framework allowed private participation, but established water as a public trust with strict quality, pricing, and access guarantees. As for Elena Vasquez, she was appointed to lead a new scientific commission overseeing water quality nationwide. Her expertise, combined with her proven courage, made her the perfect person to ensure that science, not profit, would guide water policy. 6 months after those fateful 36 hours, Claudia Sheinbaum stood at the inauguration of a community-managed water purification system in one of the villages she had passed through during her covert journey. Beside her stood the taxi driver who had brought her back to Los Pinos, now employed as part of a rural infrastructure development program. A journalist asked if she had considered the personal danger when undertaking her secret investigation. "Of course," she answered honestly. "But leadership isn't about personal safety. It's about responsibility to your people. Some truths can only be discovered when you step outside the palace walls and see with your own eyes." The taxi that had returned her to the presidential residence was preserved in a small museum, alongside the iPad containing the videos that had changed Mexico's future. They stood as symbols of a different kind of leadership, one based on direct action, scientific truth, and the principle that a nation's resources belong first to its people. When foreign dignitaries would later pressure her to liberalize water markets again, Sheinbaum would simply open her iPad to show them the videos she had recorded during those 36 hours and ask, "Would you let your children drink this water?" They rarely had an answer. In international forums, the Sheinbaum doctrine that essential resources are human rights that cannot be fully commodified gained traction in other nations facing similar challenges. What had begun as a dangerous solitary mission had grown into a movement that reimagined the relationship between people, governments, and the natural resources that sustain them all. And in the drought-affected regions of southern Mexico, something miraculous happened. With sustainable extraction practices implemented and water rights restored to local communities, traditional conservation methods flourished alongside modern technology. Springs that had been declared permanently dry began to flow again. Fields that had turned to dust grew green. Water remembers, an elderly Zapotec farmer told Sheinbaum during a visit to Oaxaca, "When you respect it, it returns." The president, once a scientist, and now a defender of both her nation's resources and its sovereignty, understood exactly what he meant. What do you think about this story? Do you believe leaders should sometimes go beyond traditional protocols to discover the truth? Should natural resources like water be treated differently than other commodities? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see more inspiring stories about transformative leadership. Let us know in the comments what other aspects of Claudia Sheinbaum's leadership you'd like to learn about.